Hey, Simon, thank you for coming in. You have such a marvelous background from your management degree at the University of Reading to your family operations in South America, and you being really just a marvelous consultant for things like uh, the Duchy of Cornwall estate, and
That
then
was way back when. Yeah.
Manhattan to 9/11. Of course, you've done so much in the New York region, and you have this Irish heritage and culture kind of connection as well, and just an amazing amount of contribution, and especially in sort of resilience and supporting people who are in distress and so on, and you become quite known for that, including I thought it was really interesting. You have this work with Apple as well. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of fascinating. So and we belong to some of the same communities, right? Where there's people who think in a very broad and big impact way. So they're not sitting on the fence; they're actually doing something. They talk about impact,
Mm.
but they actually execute an impact, and you definitely do that in so many profound and wonderful and outstanding ways. So, Simon, thank you for coming in and sharing experiences with our audience.
Stephen, it's a joy. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be standing in the foothills of the singularity as we are together at the moment. And congratulations on your recent ACM award for
Oh,
outstanding contribution.
oh, that's not
Well done, you.
that's not public yet.
I see it's on the internet.
Oh, is it?
It is indeed, sir. Yes.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I didn't know they made it
It's
public.
out. It's out there, so you can put that in the wing that you keep all your various awards in. Richly deserved, all of them. But no, it's a great pleasure to be here and for the tremendous opportunity of speaking with you and with your listeners.
Well, again, thank you, get it. And I didn't know that. I didn't know they made it public yet. So, again, thank you so much. And you have this marvelous story arc, and your family has this marvelous story arc. And I'm always curious, and my audience is always curious, what were the three inflection points in your life that made this wonderful person you are today? And sometimes people think, well, I went and got my master's, and they start there, or oh, I got a job at Goldman Sachs. No, let's go like when you're 3 or 5 years old. What were the things that really shaped you when you were really young? And it could have been inside, outside the family, could have been challenges or opportunities. And when I do interviews, some people have said, I remember, for example, something happened before I was even born. They had sort of this early memory that shaped them in some way. So it could be a sort of mix, and it could be mentors as well, things like that, inside, outside the family, and school. But what are those three really defining moments that made this really marvelous person you are today?
Kind of you say so. I, I, I mean, if there's one thing that sort of makes me get up in the morning, is I guess I fight for the underdog and for somebody who needs assistance. And there are many ways that one can be educated and learn about things. You can do it from books, from lectures, from podcasts. But the greatest way of understanding something, I think, is to live it. And I would have to say, not quite going back to my 3-year-old, but certainly going back to an 11-year-old to me, it was when I first went to boarding school in Great Britain. And British boarding schools in those days looked beautiful on the outside, and they had many great things going for them. But there was undoubtedly an element of brutality, casual violence at times, both psychological and physical. And I got away fairly lightly. I have a friend who I was a dear friend in those days, who to this moment won't talk about his experience at boarding school in those days. And the brother of Princess Diana, Charles Spencer, he wrote an entire book on that. So if there's something that made me understand the nature of fear, concern, seeing people at the end of brutality and concern, that was certainly a key part of that. And that was something that, being a boarding school, you, bit like being somebody in a displacement camp, you can't go somewhere else at the end of the day or at the weekend. You're there, and that is your life. And so I do understand that. And then when I first came across to the United States, about 25 years or so ago, a little over, I first lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I was there, as you mentioned, for 9/11. And 9/11 it was an experience that changed the world in so many ways. But for those of us on that island, it was a very deeply personal thing that is ingrained in us. We closed the windows tightly, but that fine dust came in and went everywhere. And we knew what and who was in that dust. It was so personal. You would go around Manhattan and you see those sheets plastered to the walls and the fences, desperately saying, I'm trying to find my brother, my son, my wife, my sister. I'm just hoping that they survive. That has lived with me. It's I would say that, I said to you once, I said that I was talking about it to somebody 10 years after the event, and I suddenly realized I had tears coming down my cheeks. And I wasn't feeling particularly emotional, but I realized it was deeply ingrained in me. And it's a bit like if you go to an English seaside town, you can buy those sticks of hard candy, Seaside Rock it's called. And if you look inside, there is the wording, the lettering, that is usually the name of that seaside town. I think for those of us who are in Manhattan on that day and the subsequent days, if you broke us open, you would see 9/11 written inside us. And so it gives you, it changed the direction of my work from being business to be much more disaster mitigation and response. And it's something that brought back to me the need to try and help people who are going through a bad time.
So let's go back to, you indicated that boarding school was a really profound experience for you in different ways because of the climate and the safeguards perhaps weren't in place and often in these kinds of environments, and things have changed since then, hopefully. But that made you really sensitive to the other, or being isolated, or not having the means to defend, right? Sometimes you're kind of in a defenseless kind of environment. So, but you were at a boarding school. It also means that your family then, I would assume, had some kind of means to have you in a boarding school. Can you talk about what that family environment was like? Was it encouraging and progressive, or was it more conservative? And did that shape you in any way?
I would say that, I mean, my family was loving and caring. They were brought up obviously in a different generation. My mother, who raised me, was in previously a Wren officer, and she had all of the customs and niceties of somebody who was in the Royal Navy as an officer, and so I was expected to do things in a particular way. But it was caring, it was supportive, and I mean, I'm a country boy. I grew up in the countryside. You would jump over the back fence. I'd be out in the woods amongst the foxes and the badgers and the deer. And whenever I walk around somewhere like Manhattan, I wonder how that little country boy in a village of 250 people got into a vast conurbation.
So, but it was an entrepreneurial family, right? So that would drive sort of your entrepreneurial sense.
Yes. I mean, my father, Zeno, I mean, he came from a fairly poor background, very driven. He was a police officer at one stage, but then he went into growing his own security company. He worked for George Wackenhut for a while, Wackenhut Security, and then decided to go off and do it for himself. And he grew the security firm into a vast thing, which had thousands of employees, roamed across 6 states of Brazil, and was very successful for many, many years. But at that early stage, it was something that wasn't close to me because of the family situation was that he was off doing his thing, and there was a period where we didn't connect, and then I reconnected with him once more and got to know him as an adult a bit better and helped out with the company where I could.
So the background is really more regimented, though, right? Because he's in security, was a police officer, created a risk mitigation company, which became one of the leaders in the world, in essence, right? And your mother came from a military background, so you'd have a lot of structure around you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm never late for a meeting. I'm always sort of there 5 minutes ahead. 5 minutes ahead is on time. And I had that discipline from different directions growing up.
Okay, so you go to boarding school. It's transformative for you in different ways. You learn a lot of lessons. It helps shape your empathy for others, for the underserved communities. And then you decide to go to university and you get an honors degree in management. What made you decide to go into sort of the business side and not, let's say, science or law or some of the other fields that are available? What attracted you to you got an honors degree in management from the University of Reading in Berkshire. So what attracted you to that kind of educational arc?
Well, I was very fortunate. I did both a lot of arts and a lot of sciences at boarding school. And I was, in fact, the first person, the last 2 years of boarding school, I did maths, physics, chemistry, and biology, and nothing else. And yet I was still editor of the college magazine. The first. And I really felt that I wanted something that was grounded. I could have done something age. To a lot of people who are on the art side, science and business was unknown. It was like a foreign field that they did not really comprehend. Whereas a lot of people on the business side or the science side loved the arts. So I thought, if I want to keep both of these, all these different aspects in my life, maybe I'm not going to go off and do English literature at university. Maybe I'm going to do something that's more practical and structuring things, trying to grow things. And maybe it was just my father's entrepreneurial nature coming out in me. I wanted to learn some of the tools that one could use in doing that.
So just to the audience, because this is done over the internet, so sometimes you're going to find, I'm finding from my end, Simon, you're freezing sometimes. So, but to the audience, it's just the internet. When you do remote interviews. So now you began as in the consulting business, right? An asset valuer and advising clients in big ones like BP and British Gas and the Duchy of Cornwall Estate and Prince of Wales, et cetera, right? So, and that's a really fascinating. What did you learn from those experiences?
Flexibility. We did some interesting things. So, for example, one of the things we did, we had to work out what the value was of the mooring rights of nuclear-powered submarines in an estuary. I mean, they really sort of threw unusual situations at you. And part of that was an opening up to see some of the fun things that business could be. Now, at that stage, I was learning, if you like, on somebody else's dime. But I got some very interesting projects that I was working with as part of a team. And it was a lot of fun and very educational. You learned you'd been given some of the tools in your education, but now you were learning how to use those tools in the real world.
And then you end up moving to the States, and as you mentioned, then you were involved and really moved, and it really impacted your life with 9/11, and that helped shape you. And like you said, the imprint is always there now, and it has shaped your present into your future. You also got involved in things like the Northeast Blackout in Jersey City, right? And then Irish Heritage and Culture event in New York City Hall with Christine Quinn, and it talks at the cat, sort of like Simon and the Irish American Arts Awards, and then Jersey City during the Superstorm Sandy. You got a certificate of appreciation from the mayor of Jersey City for volunteer disaster preparedness, commendation from the city council after responding to a street shooting. And so I'm kind of walking through some of the things that you've done. You got involved early, actually, with the Genomics project as well. I thought that was really interesting. Can you, so we're going back again. So I'll sort of walk forward and let's go back on the Genomics project. What were some of the elements that really guided you to taking that project? And because we're getting Simon frozen, I'm going to go off camera to see if that's going to make a difference sometimes. So I'm going to go off camera now. So Simon, I was asking about, as I mentioned, you're interested in this genomics project. So I'm going to go off camera to see if that'll help.
So what was that question again?
So, Simon, so we'll redo this portion here. So Simon, really, really fascinating. You study management, you work as a consultant, BP, British Gas, the Duchess of Cornwall, Prince of Wales. You moved to the States, and you were saying how transformational that whole period was with 9/11. And as you indicated, it imprinted you in essence, and it's like a permanent imprint. And it's been guiding your empathy, for example, your sensitivity into underserved communities. And then you got involved with the Jersey City during the Northeast Blackout, Irish Heritage and Culture event in New York, and the Irish American Arts Award, New Jersey or Jersey City during the Superstorm Sandy, including a certificate of appreciation from the mayor of Jersey City for volunteer disaster preparedness work, a commendation from the city council responding to a street shooting. Now we're sort of in that 2017 timeframe. Resilient JC launch, documented resilient work, named to the Center for Minority Research Advisory Board, et cetera. So we're kind of walking through to the present, but project manager for the Masters of the Air, 9 episodes with Apple, and amazing there. And so a really interesting story arc. But earlier, you also got involved with this genomics project. Can you describe that?
Yes. So again, this is probably my father's genetics coming through and being entrepreneurial and coming up with ideas. This was in the early days, or certainly early-ish days of genomics, certainly looking at it from the perspective of 2026. And I had previously heard about the situation with African Americans. And at that stage, there was very pointed conversation about how African Americans, their heritage is so precious to African Americans. But you can only trace it so far back in those days through records. And then you had this chasm of the Atlantic Ocean, and they couldn't really get beyond that chasm to trace their heritage any further. And then I came across advances in genomics, and I was thinking, well, maybe with genomics, it might be possible to get to a stage where we can do something and begin to put pins in a map for the very first time. So if somebody then could then discover that they had Fulani ancestry, for example, or Hausa, and you could then learn Hausa lullaby to sing to your child, or you could wear some Fulani cloth or whatever. And so I had to go through the normal iterative process of developing a new idea. Is it a good idea? Is it technically feasible? Does anybody care? How would you fund it? And then I came across to the United States to talk to people, and my goodness, that was an education. I was very blessed to have some wonderful people who took me under their wing. Henry Louis Gates, Professor Henry Louis Gates, who maybe you know, was wonderful in talking to me and helping me both understand African American culture better and meeting people. I met with great geneticists over here, such as Craig Ventnor, who sadly passed away just recently. And I met with wonderful African American leaders, ranging from people like Jesse Jackson and Spike Lee to the wonderful J. Bruce Llewellyn, who was the cousin of Colin Powell, who was a huge bear of a man and gave me a heck of a grilling as to trying to work out who I was and was I on the side of the angels and did I know what I was talking about. And then it was as if a light switch suddenly clicked. And he said, okay, he knows his stuff. His heart's on the right side. And he was, again, wonderfully embracing. And then, so we worked on all of that. And then eventually I handed it over to African-American leadership. And you can see now, I mean, African-Americans can now at this stage, we were right at the pointy end of that before, but it was only just becoming possible. And now African-Americans can take DNA analysis. There's been lots of sampling done in Africa and other places. And it applies to me as well. I can trace my genetic ancestry to the Bororo in South America, the indigenous people in South America, in part. So I get it totally. But yes, now which is something that only this generation can do and previous generations couldn't, they can put pins in a map in parts of Africa and know that, that some of their ancestry comes from there, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, just an amazing contribution, and we talked about this earlier. Excuse me. Served on the board of the Youth Foundation for Jersey City, founded Resilience JC Incorporated, which is a nonprofit, but it's dedicated to disaster resilience and community preparedness, and serving as its first president. And it really ties into this work then as the rapid response team for the Center of Toxicology and Environmental Health for nearly a decade, and responding to major hazmat incidences in the U.S. and the U.K. Kind of reminds me of the work of David Bray. I don't know if you know him, but he also was involved in this kind of work. And then, of course, you also served as project manager for Apple TV and leading local pandemic oversight for their flagship Spielberg Hanks production Masters of the Air, and that would have been quite an amazing experience, I'm sure. So let's talk about this work now on sort of resilience and preparedness. People who get displaced, and you're the chief vision officer of the International Foundation for the Displaced. I mean, I could see all of these things converging, right? Also on the board of advisors for the World Care Center Disaster Volunteerism Academy and the advisory board of the Center for Minorities Research at the University of St. Andrew. All of these things are converging or adjacent to this idea of risk mitigation advocacy for displaced populations. So can you tie all those pieces together and, some of the compelling stories in that area, how you've been able to take action in a way that will support what people who are disadvantaged or displaced, and your vision of how these have all come together, and your ability maybe to action different communities because you worked in so many different spheres of influence, right? So.
Yeah. So thank you. The move into disaster mitigation came largely from 9/11 and from going through Superstorm Sandy. And I realized that being a spontaneous volunteer was all well and good, but maybe I should do more. And so I volunteered for and trained for and deployed with the local volunteer emergency response team part-time, in my in my spare time. And that was good. But then I got spent additional training. Being me, I went and did additional training. And I got reached out to, and somebody said, you should talk to the people from the Center for Toxicology and Environmental Health who respond to these large-scale incidents, which was, I did that for a decade, amongst other things. As you know, I multitask. But we responded to all sorts of things, from the LA fires to large explosions in Texas, where debris dropped down 10 miles away, and 60,000 people were displaced from one of those. And so I got a feeling for this, and through the work that I had done, and through the fact that I sat on the board of a youth foundation, I ended up talking to an organization called The Vine, which you are also familiar with. And The Vine is a remarkable collection of many people. That was in about 13,000 people now, over 70 countries, of high net worth individuals and politicians and movers and shakers, beautifully created and curated by Adria Dunn. And she's very good at making sure that not only is somebody incredibly successful, but they have a good heart. And they don't all go together, but luckily, as with your good self, I mean, there are many people who are like that. And I was chatting with her, and I said, there is this issue that is getting worse and worse and worse, and it does concern me. And if we are as darn good as I think everybody is, with their amazing life experience, work experience, connections, resources, maybe we should be in here and doing something. And I mentioned to you before that I'm a country boy, grew up in a village of 250 people. And I sort of envisaged this issue of displaced people, about more in a second, as a bit like a cart that's stuck in a rut. And there are wonderful people already in there pushing and shoving and trying to get this cart out of the rut. But we need to be helping. And we're not just sort of throwing bucks at them from a distance, but get in there and put our shoulders against that cart and help push. And maybe with our experience, we can, our contacts, we could even bring in a crane and help lift it or whatever. But we should be helping. Because at the moment, there's about 120 million people in the world who are displaced by conflict or disaster. So that, by reference, is about the size of the population of Japan. All of those people have been displaced. And the forecasts are that this is going to grow at least to well over 200 million. And some forecasts are saying that it's going to go to maybe even 1 billion. It's a tsunami that is coming our way. And it's being caused partially by conflict, but also by the fact that we are getting flooding, we are getting increasing drought, we are getting heat domes that go and make areas way hotter than the human body can take, and also by crop zones moving, where you can't grow your food wherever you were anymore. So in the old days, going back to prehistory, human beings would move. But now we have a different setup in the world, so we've got to work out what to do with this. These people are so much like you and me. And in disasters, the last few directors of FEMA have said, in the old days, what we used to do is we used to say, y'all go sit to one side and we'll come in and we'll help and just leave it to us. But they said that now what you need to do is to empower the local people. The directors of FEMA said, the true first responders are the people who are there. Empower them and you'll get a way better response. Well, this problem of displacement is like that. In the old days, until very recently, it was a paternalistic sort of, the big governments in the world, the wealthy governments, are going to take a whole load of cash and they're going to give it to some organizations who roll in and dole out stuff. Well, that has fallen apart. In the last year, the UN said that they needed maybe 47 billion to help these humanitarian causes, and they only got a third of that. The US government cut back, the European governments cut back for all sorts of causes, but the old paradigm is gone. And these people need to be empowered and given the tools. The cutbacks have caused job losses, obviously, in the organizations that used to help in this area, which means loss of skills, loss of institutional knowledge, and all of those problems. But on the front line, where people are suffering, it has caused immense pain, and we have to find new ways. I was talking to somebody about their experience in Central Africa at one of the displacement camps there, and they used to have three different groups, or they do have three different groups of people as they are categorized according to their level of need. And there was sort of one end, they'd get a small amount of help, and at the other end, they would get more help. But all of that's been cut back because of the change in the paradigm and the fact that it isn't working the way that it used to. And these poor women, they are seeing their children starve to death in front of them. And these women are so distraught, they're going out and they are hanging themselves from the few trees that remain outside the camps. There is a level of distress that is appalling. And we've got to remember, this is human capital the size of a population of Japan. And people like Albert Einstein, like Freddie Mercury, like Sergey Brin were all displaced people at one time. Their families were displaced. So there is so much potential there that is repressed by the situation. And we need to find ways to break through and do things in a new way now that the publicly funded paradigm has fallen apart. And I will say that there is, on the why should we care subject, yes, we care because we try to be good people and we care about somebody who's in need. But there is also a very practical thing that when you get large-scale displacement, it does mess up supply chains. It gives greatly increased problems with disease outbreaks because you've got people moving sometimes in insanitary conditions, moving in places that they didn't before, eating things that they didn't before. So there are very, very practical ways, apart from releasing the potential of the human capital of the people involved. So what we have done is, I was talking to the folks at the Vine, and we decided to create the over there somewhere, the Institute for the International Foundation for the Displaced, and basically it is moving into the private sector some of the need that previously was dealt with by the public sector. It can act as a private operating layer, working with private capital, which is so keen to help, but not always knowing exactly how best to help. And I have to say that everybody we talk to are treating us like the pizza delivery guy. Everybody's pleased to see us, whether it's people who are working at the sharp end with with displaced persons, or people in the organizations or NGOs. Everybody's pleased to see you when you're the pizza delivery guy, and everybody agrees that it is the right time for this, and that we've got to do something, and this is the right way to do it. And indeed, you and I have spoken about this before, and there are several people who we know in common who have joined us, and we have had people from our mutual circles now who have joined us on the executive board. People have joined us on the advisory board, and Robert Kirkpatrick, another mutual contact, he has joined us as part of our executive team. Everybody gets it, and they say, yes, this is the right thing to do at the right time in the right way. The way that we will work is we will use bodies like the Vine, where you have quiet conversations, Chatham House rules, building on trust, working with family offices and corporations and politicians. And indeed, our first board chair, Paul Newman, is the CEO of the Vine. So we're very sort of closely linked, and there is a tremendous element of trust there. We are living at an interesting times with AI, as you know, even better than I. And there are difficulties in knowing exactly how things are going to change. but we have certain main guidelines as to what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. We're going to do internal and external projects, impact investment, and we certainly aim to be technology forward, bottleneck led. In other words, sort of feet on the ground, ambition rich, but validation first. We very much want to be magnetic to outside ideas, but very selective in prototyping. So we want to think big, be open, but be very, very grounded. And again, stabilizing the situation, yes, but empowering these wonderful people who are just like you and I, who are displaced. I had two quick stories of how amazing people are. So there was one young man who got a tomato. He was in a camp and he got a tomato. What did he do with that tomato? He took all the seeds out of that tomato and he planted them and nurtured them and grew them and is now selling tomato plants to help both his family and the people around him. How about that for entrepreneurial? And then there was another young man, Mohammed, and he was given a 3D printer. Now, what did he do with this 3D printer? He didn't just make sort of toys and things. He designed and produced models of destroyed cultural artifacts and special buildings that had been destroyed in the fighting. And he was able to sell those to the community around him, thereby providing an income not only for his family, but also helping people around him remember those important cultural things that are so important to us all. Empowering people is what we are all about. Going back to what the heads of the FEMA said, trust people, empower people, and that's how you get the best result. So we're not going to just drop off goodies and then run away. We are working to empower people using modern technology. If I may, Stephen, I'll give you one. I'm the vision officer. I'll give you one vision that I've got. So this is what one vision. I have this vision in my head, and maybe we will be part of it. Maybe we'll just encourage it. Maybe we'll help shape it. I don't know. But I have a vision of a lady with, maybe 3 small children, and she's in a very difficult situation, and she's scared, and she's worried, and she doesn't quite know what to do. But she has an edge AI device. Think of it like a smartphone, but it doesn't need all the power or the compute. All that's in the cloud, in the Dyson swarm that maybe Mr. Musk has put up in the sky above us. So it's inexpensive, doesn't need a lot of power, and she says, in whatever language she speaks in, hey, I'm really very scared about the situation here. I'm not quite sure what the best thing is to do. Can you help me? I'm told you can help me. And then the answer comes back, talks to her in her own language and says, I'm sorry to hear that. I quite get it. It's a difficult situation. Tell me more about your situation. And so through that, she can learn what the options are. She is empowered by the information, and then she can help make the right decision. And so there's so much that we can do. There's information that we can empower people with. There are tools that we can empower people with. And I know you have great conversations about nanotechnology and robotics and UAVs. There's tremendous advances in many areas, and we are investigating quite a good few of them.
Yeah, now it just reminds me, I think David Bray has joined your board, right? Or not?
He has indeed. Yes. Yeah. He's a great guy. Lovely. Again, a wonderful person who has tremendous skills and knowledge, but a heart the size of the planet.
And have you connected with Bernard Kowach, who he's the Director of Innovation and Ventures for the World Food Program. It's the world's largest innovation accelerator, but there's a lot of overlap between what they're doing with displaced people, but from a food angle. And they've created a blockchain technology to serve, millions, well over 100 million people around the world. So, Have you connected with him yet? I can't.
Not yet. He's on the to-do list. I have quite a to-do list, and I've got a feeling after this podcast, I may have even more on the to-do list of people to speak with. But yes, I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are looking at is blockchain and having sovereign self-identity and information, so people can show who they are, what their education is, where they live, their nationality, and all the rest. But it's a very, very tricky area that a lot of people are working. There was a situation in 2017 where about 800,000 Rohingya were displaced from Myanmar to Bangladesh. And the deal was that they said, oh, we'll give you food and shelter, but we need to know who you are. So they did a lot of fingerprints and retinal scans and photographs and all of that, which was sort of understandable. But then what happened, unfortunately, is the question came up about, well, can some of these people be repatriated and go back where they were? And all of that information got given back to the Myanmar government. So we need to be very careful about building up people's information and the access, and we're all over that. I mean, you have to be in the computer nowadays to exist. I mean, this is the life that we all live. But that information, when you are in a vulnerable position, is very tricky, and you have to work out true safeguards.
I'm just thinking again, have you talked to Stephen Hitt already at all? He's the founder of Milling Peacemakers. He's just signed an MOU with communities of youth representing about 250 million people. And he has an AI that's in terms of conflict resolution. It's basically can walk and talk in multiple languages and guide people through any kind of problem scenario they have, but from a guiding them so that they can resolve whether it's an internal conflict or external conflict, but does it in a very thoughtful and measured way. And then the AI is already completed, so that so I see parallels there. And I think we've talked about it before, but Fernando Garibay as well of the Garibay Institute, and he was the producer behind quite a really famous a music producer.
Yeah, but there are some, as I say, there's some wonderful people working. Some of them are working with nonprofits. Some of them are working using government money. What we're working with is producing this fund for some of these projects, also using the influence that one can get through talking quietly to people in family offices and politicians through the Vine and elsewhere. And it's working with these people is something that I'm greatly looking forward to. It's a little bit like trying to drink out of Niagara Falls with a thimble at the moment. But yes, these are people who I am very much hoping to speak with in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and then there's Alain Chatrit, right, of the Knowledge Impact Network, which is now the YPO affiliated with, and it's actually they are the heart of the YPO Pledge community as well. And I think I've done an intro. I can't recall if I did an intro to Alain Chatrit. Definitely, there's a lot of.
Not for Alain, no. I mean, you've been most kind, and as I say, many of our mutual contacts are now come on. I mean, it's amazing. It's very humbling how people get what we're doing very quickly. And the more they know about the subject area, the more they get it. And so it's certainly a good time to be getting in to do this.
So what are the gaps? So, what are the areas that you're looking for to address to move the International Foundation for the Displaced even further along? You're the founder, the chief vision officer, and you have so many other communities that you're already part of. What do you need to further mobilize your foundation for the displaced?
Okay, so I mean, what I would say is that it takes a village to do this. I mean, I've got amazing, amazing people on board already, but it takes a village. And so if any of your listeners feel that they have really interesting or inventive ideas, contacts, resources, whatever, please reach out and have an informal conversation, and we can have a talk about it. It's walk with us on this journey. Now, for some people, they'll say, "Well, you're new, and so I don't know if I want to work with a new organization." But for others, for them, contact us anyhow, and maybe we can get to know each other and maybe do something down the line. For those who are excited by something new, with an amazing team, and we're very well founded and organized, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you, work with you. I'm especially interested in expanding our range of contacts in the Middle East and in Asia, because the main areas for the displaced are, Asia and the Middle East and Africa. And we've got some good contacts in Africa that could always do more. But, I don't want it to be, and I've made a big effort that it isn't all white guys with gray hair sitting around the table, even virtually, but this is truly representative of the people of the world, because this is a global problem. And you will see displaced people all over the place. It's amazing how many people are displaced in the United States each year due to forest fires and things like that, and hurricanes. And but luckily, the United States has been wealthy. That is only temporary, but it is a truly global problem. Central America, South America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, the Pacific, with the rising waters of the islands. It's a huge global issue.
So you indicated people can reach out. So is there a website and a contact form they can fill out and say, hey, I have an interest. These are the ways I can support what you're doing. Maybe it's through some kind of donation, perhaps, or maybe they can, their network or relationships they bring to the table. What is the way that you can manage that inbound?
So thank you for asking that. So what I would say the best way to reach out to me at the moment is you can either obviously find me on LinkedIn. There's only one Simon Pereira Shorey. And also you could email us at info@ift.earth, and we would love to hear from you. The website should be up pretty soon, but it's not just up yet. But info@ift.earth, or just reach out to me at LinkedIn is the best way. And I would love to hear from anybody. There is so much to be done. People are very excited about it, and everybody wants to be the pizza delivery guy and get that sort of reaction.
And then as you progress, what are some of your immediate ways to address this, global issue or challenge of the hundreds of millions that are displaced in some way, whether, like you said, through some natural disaster, it could be climate, it could be some of the chaotic and uncertain situations that we're in, even as you indicated in Western countries, there's displaced people, tens of millions of displaced people. So what are some areas that you're targeting?
Yeah, I mean, what we can't do is we can't replace the billions that governments have been doing. So what we have to focus on is catalytic areas where, a comparatively small amount of money donated, that we put together, that has been kindly donated by our supporters, can make a big difference in certain areas. And a lot of that is by research, by developing interesting projects. So, for example, one that we're looking at, we've got a wonderful guy who has joined our advisory board, who has got a great deal of experience in logistics in this field. And there are big changes in UAV technology in recent years with ultra heavy lift drones, sadly brought about because of the conflict in Ukraine. And so we're looking at some areas like that. It's famously called the last mile problem, where you can get all that needs to be got so far, but that last mile, the roads may be washed away or covered with debris or whatever. So we're talking to people and seeing if we can put something together that is particularly robust enough and good enough that we can try and do something there. That's one example. There are several areas that we're looking in. We're not really in a position to announce all of them right now, but what we want to do is we want to help others, and most especially help the people on the ground help themselves by
So that's
empowering.
where the World Food Program, they're in 80 countries. They have the largest logistics program. They have 100 aircraft. They have like 24 ships. They have 6,000 vehicles, 18 to 22,000 staff globally. They have
Yep.
the largest innovation accelerator in the world for event
Hmm.
causes. They already have autonomous vehicles that they're testing, working
Hmm.
with the German space program, which is
Yep.
often providing some of the science behind that. So they have already an existing footprint in major countries around the world. They already have technology that they're already deploying around the world. And they have the largest logistics program in the world with actual aircraft and ships and
Yeah.
vehicles and things like that. So it'd be a
They
perfect
have a
partnership, right?
they have a lot of goodies and a lot of people. But this is the paradigm that is falling apart before our eyes. They rely a lot on publicly donated money from governments. There's an article in the Guardian newspaper only today, for a fallout from the Global Partnership Conference, and it's saying how all of these big organisations have done things in a certain way, and unfortunately, when you get a really big organization, even with the very best people, there's a certain arterial sclerosis that begins to set in. And the fact that the funding pipelines to these things have been cut off to a huge extent means that a lot of them are saying, oh my goodness, what do we do now? And I can tell you, we've been talking to large organizations such as the United Nations, IOM, and the Institute for Migration, and others, and they are saying we are in deep problems. The IDMC, the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, who have got a world class reputation, they're losing the data, and their budget has been slashed by 50%. And so all of these big organizations and their previous paradigms of how they're going to work, they're running into a brick wall. And when we talk to them, they say, oh, can you help us? We're changing things, but we need to work with you to try and carry forward the things that we've been previously doing in a different way. And so the World Food Program, all of the IOM, UNHCR, all of these wonderful large organizations, they're all in a process of reassessing how do we move forward in the future, and how do we find different ways of doing things. And we will be a private operating layer. We could help some of these people with what they're doing, but through organizations such as the Vine, we are tapped into private capital. And there are amazing people who want to do good things with that capital in a way that truly works. And hopefully we can rejig all of this so that in the next few years, maybe the old way has fallen apart, but we can get to the people who really, really need this assistance in a way that empowers them, and they can find the food and the shelter and the security that they truly need.
So, Simon, we're, excuse me, down to the last 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm going to ask a closing question, but let's just walk through what we discussed. You're a British born, Irish Brazilian leader and entrepreneur, diverse background. You went to boarding school, got a management honors degree from the University of Reading. Your family was very entrepreneurial, but coming from a sort of a very structured sort of backgrounds, both on your mother and your father's side, but as I mentioned, loving, caring, and disciplined, and you learned that discipline in boarding school. You learned about how a person would get isolated, and it made you very sensitive to the needs of people and what that would mean. And you became your early work as a consultant with major clients, and we talked about that: British Petroleum, British Gas. There were people that are of the royal family. You moved to the States. You worked on and addressed the need with genomics and genealogy, and you addressed that, working with some of the great leaders in America. You also been involved with addressing things like with Jersey City and working on different projects with them on education and safety and security in the public schools. You've earned a number of recognitions in this work. 9/11 was very moving for you. And as you mentioned, it kind of imprinted on your life, kind of like forever. And of course, you were involved with specific things like the Northeast blackout, Superstorm Sandy, street shootings, and disaster mitigation work and personal intervention. You founded Resilient JC, a nonprofit dedicated toward disaster resilience. You've been involved with the rapid response team for the Center for Toxicology and Environmental Health, very kind of mapping a parallel to David Bray and some of the work he's done in major hazmat incidents in the US and the UK. Worked as project manager for things like Apple TV and the Spielberg Hans production, Masters of the Air, the second largest TV movie production ever. And so you got that kind of background. Additionally served on other major incidences like the Palisades fire, the Port Nash chemical plant explosion, which, and you mentioned during the interview that the evacuation of 60,000 people debris following, and then of course serving as founder and chief vision officer of the International Foundation for the Displaced, and that really because of your integration as well with Divine and the work Roger done and a marvelous community. But you also serve on the board advisor for the World Care Center, Disaster Volunteerism Academy, the advisory board for the Center of Minorities Research, et cetera, et cetera. So just an amazing background. And what you're doing now is calling for support and saying, if you want to help us, because all of the government kind of traditional capital sources have been redirected in other areas. And so private capital is now coming to the board to address things like what the World Food Program is doing, or UNHCR, these different UN agencies. And you're there to act as that bridge, that vehicle to support the hundreds of millions of people that are displaced, because it's even in Western countries, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the uncertainty and chaos that's happening globally. And some could say it's climate, but not every people believe in climate, but there's still local events that are in some way disrupting people and they need help. And you've said, you know what, I'm here to help. And you created a marvelous organization, amazing people at the board level, being the CEO as well. I mean, you named some of those people, and now you're reaching out to the community and say, come and join us. Let's work together hand in hand as a village to solve one of the most pressing problems in the world today. So I wanted to kind of wrap up that arc that you shared with me. And then that leads to the final question. You got about a minute and a half, and that is, what ask do you have? What additional outstanding ask or recommendation you have the audience? So it could be a recommendation and a question you want to ask the audience for them to ponder.
Okay. So what I would certainly say is, first of all, thank you, Stephen, for this opportunity. Greatly appreciate it, and thank you for your help in many ways with this project. What I would say is, if you're listening to this, please think of the immense human potential of the many, many millions of people who are caught up in displacement for one reason or another, and how we want to try and minimize that for heart and head reasons, and how we want to release that human potential, that human capital, to the benefit of all humankind. And if you please think about who you are, if you listen to this, and what might be the way that you could play some part in this. And it could be resources, It could be people you know. It could be skills. It could be the new product that you're thinking about coming online. It could be that you'd like to partner with us in some way. Think about what would be the way that you could most usefully assist. And I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, info@ift.earth. And I look forward to making many new friends through the wonderful opportunity of this podcast. Thank you, Stephen.
And thank you, Simon, for your marvelous and wonderful continuing contributions, and such a magnificent person, very soul-driven as well, to support the world in a better way and for the benefit of all ecosystems and the benefit of humanity. So thank you again for coming in.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.